Why don't I read the preamble and get that out of the way? We'll take the roll call. Good evening. As chair of the Facilities Advisory Committee, I am declaring that an emergency exists and I am invoking the provisions of RSA 91-A.2.3b. Federal, state, and local officials have determined that gatherings of 10 or more people pose a substantial risk to our community in its continuing efforts to combat the spread of COVID-19. In concurring with their determination, I also find that this meeting is imperative to the continued operation of town government and services, which are vital to public safety and confidence during this emergency. As such, this meeting will be conducted without a quorum of this body physically present in the same location. At this time, I also welcome members of the public accessing this meeting remotely. Even though this meeting is being conducted in a unique manner under unusual circumstances, the usual rules of conduct and decorum apply. Let's start the meeting by taking a roll call attendance when each member states their name. Also, please state whether there is anyone in the room with you during this meeting. All right, so we'll start the roll. Rob Corson.
Here, and I am alone.
Amanda Kelly.
Present and alone.
Mark Layton.
Present and alone.
Peter Lennon.
Here and alone.
And I am Chris Weeks, and I am here and alone in my basement. All right, so let me pull up the agenda. Give me just a second. I'm trying to switch gears here. I'm deeply into work today, and now I forget what we were going to talk about. Agenda 218. Oh yeah, first item is the meeting minutes from February 4th. Amanda circulated those earlier this week. Has everyone had a chance to review, and any comment on those?
No comments from me.
None from me. They were good minutes.
No comments either.
Not too long.
You said what needed to be said.
All right.
I didn't have any comments.
Hard to keep up.
Yeah, it looked good to me. I think it captured everything. I might have had questions on a couple of attributions, but I think the points made were right, and I might have misremembered who said it as well. So I don't have any comments on the minutes. I think they're good.
Okay.
So anyone?
Move they be adopted.
Pardon me?
Move they be adopted.
Oh, okay. Any second?
Second.
So we'll take a vote. Rob, how do you vote? Accept the minutes?
Except as submitted.
Okay. Mark?
Same. Approve or accepted.
Peter?
Yes, same.
I move to accept the minutes. So Amanda, I don't know if you vote on that as well, or?
Sure. I approve.
Okay. All right. So we vote 5-0 to accept the minutes. Hi, we have a couple more people. Hi, Melissa and Daryl. How are you?
Good. How's everyone doing today?
Good.
Good.
You missed the least interesting administrative part of the meeting, so your timing is perfect.
I like it.
Yeah. All right. So for the other agenda items today, at the last meeting, we didn't get through all the procedural items that I wanted to get to, so I put those up first. I think we can work through those quickly, and then we can move on to some of the other things. So meeting times and frequency, I think we established that twice a month, 4 o'clock, first and third Thursdays of the month. So we did settle that. One of the things I wanted to bring up too is alternate members. Does anyone have thoughts on bringing on 1 or 2 alternate members this year? Any potential candidates? What do you think of that?
I think it's a good idea. I think we talked about it last time. It also gives us, if somebody else can't make a meeting or an event, and if we were going to split things up and have people go to different committee meetings, then it would be a way of balancing out the workload.
I agree.
Yeah, I would agree. I think we're limited to one, but I'm not certain. We'd have to check the webpage. But I think that definitely having at least one would be really
Okay.
good.
I thought it was two, but maybe it is one. I think adding one this year would be a good goal to strive for. Anybody have any ideas on someone to recruit? And I don't know, Dave, you might know, how does that, do you have to post for that, or how does that work typically?
Well, sometimes we do put it on our website if there's an opening. Well, we will, and solicit for, applications, and then someone would apply and the select board would appoint.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I guess if we recruited someone, we'd have them go through the application process and they would be vetted by and approved by the select board. If you have anyone in mind, let them know and we can get them the application and start the process. Someone on the construction side might be good to have, but I don't know any contractors that live in town myself.
Chris, you were right. I was wrong. It is two according to the charter. I'll have to check on the website, but I think the charter I took off the website was accurate whenever I took it off. So it is two.
Okay. Yeah, I like I said, if we could add one person this year, I think that's a good goal. So if you know anyone or you think of someone, let us know. So the next item on my procedural items is central digital file storage. So I set up a Google account so that we could store files on there. I tried to send the link to everybody. Did you get a link to that particular file? It might have got sent to your, what do you call it, spam folder there, but you have access to that, Mark?
Yeah, no, I got it.
Okay.
Yep, it
So
worked for me.
I got it.
My postings are by no means exhaustive, so feel free to put anything up there that you would like to have and share. And I'm thinking, we could put our minutes up there, so next time you write the minutes, we can just link to it from there, and we can look at it and edit right there.
So I was just going to ask that, Chris, so we can make those changes in the document, if that's okay to go in.
I guess if it was, let's say if it was minutes, you could probably notate something there and just put a note in, and then we could evaluate it at the next meeting to approve accepting the change or not.
Okay.
If it's a draft of one of our reports, by all means, I think you can just go in and edit something, like edit or author something originally. I don't think I'd have a problem with that.
And it's pretty obvious in any Google Doc when there's more than one person in there. So should we just watch out to make sure there's not more than two or something like that at any given time?
Yes. I would say the chances of more than one of us being in the document are pretty slim.
Just in case.
Just in case, yes.
All right.
Good point. All right, so we all have access to that. I've set it up a certain way. I'm definitely open to any kind of revisions to make it work better for you. File naming conventions on the files is probably something we can make a little better too. So that way a document that's been there for a few years, if we put like clearly what it is and what year it was authored, that would probably help. All right, so that's all set up. The next thing, I guess I called it a milestone spreadsheet. One thing I'd like to do this year is just set up a spreadsheet with basic dates and milestones so that we don't miss things as they come up. I'll try to set that up before the next meeting. So it'd be just a spreadsheet with particular dates that we're trying to hit, whether it's a vote or we set a deadline for ourselves when we want to submit something, or, to get ahead of the budget process and CIP process. Make sure we're tracking that and that we can provide input in a timely manner into all of those things. So yes, I was going to say, I don't want Peter to admonish me when I miss certain big dates going forward.
Well, no, I wouldn't. But what I will say is, on the FAC website is a PowerPoint chart that the select board blessed for our goals and objectives for 2019 and 2020. And that had a notional timeline on it with some dates for when our recommendations needed to be into certain places.
Okay.
In reality, the dates were more fungible. And so the dates for this year need to be cleaned up. But you'll see, and others obviously on the committee can comment, you'll see that this lays out, at least as it relates to how we feed into the budget and to the CIP, how we thought it would work last year. And Dave Sharples, would be, I think, the source of updating some of these dates. But I also, and I'm glad Melissa's here, in April of last year, Russ put out a memo for the schedule for submitting projects. And it was, it was when he puts out his directive, which is what he did. And then there were dates for submitting to Dave and the town manager, meeting with department heads for follow-up, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I can put that, I can scan that in and send that to people. But the reason I'm bringing it up now is to ask Dave and Melissa, when they think they'll have a handle on the way the process is supposed to work this year, which would then obviously in part govern our requirements as to when to input into the main parts of the project.
I can do that because I actually draft that letter and give it to Russ to sign. So that's kind of why after last year and then being on board, that's why Russ and I asked to, be on this committee. So I haven't kind of, figured out what the process is going to be, but I intend to and incorporate the facilities committee in that. So, but I haven't, put out dates or anything at that time, as of yet. I usually do that in March or.
Yeah. And this letter came out from Russ in April. So I'm not saying where is it or anything like that. I'm just saying partial answer to Chris's question or initiative to make a milestone chart or a spreadsheet. Dave and Melissa or Russ are two of the principal inputs into when we can actually start settling our work pattern, so that hopefully this year we won't be quite as close to the deadlines as we were this last year.
Yeah.
And this only includes, go ahead.
Oh, God, yeah, I would envision that you would be early in the process before the planning board. That's kind of what I was thinking. I usually present it to the planning board in August, and that's pretty much every year. So I was kind of get you involved during the meetings with maybe not necessarily, we have the meetings with you, but like right at that same time when we meet with department heads, keep you updated and work through the process along the, in the June and July timeline. Does that sound good for you or?
Sounds good to me. So like I said, before the next meeting, I'll put something together. It won't be set in stone. It'll just block out certain times. And based on the previous year, I can put something together and go from there. Yeah, we'll fine tune it over the next couple of months. I just want a kind of a snapshot of the year, what we're looking at, and when we should be prepared to prepare some sort of work product and input.
I would say shortly after, usually the date, I forget the date, usually the deadline for the department heads is in June. Like about the third week in June usually. And then we sit down with them in the last part of June, first part of July. So I would suspect once we get that draft, you could get it toward the, at the end of June, like third week of June when we get it.
Sounds good. Any other comments on that? Take that as a no. So the next item I had was clerk roll call and votes. The select board has their clerk usually take all the roll call votes. I don't know if we need to be that formal or that efficient. It works well for them because, they meet weekly. They often have a lot of stuff going on, and their meetings can go of indeterminate length due to unknown inputs from the public. So do we want to do that? Have the clerk do the roll call, or just keep doing it with the chair as we're doing it now?
I'm fine with the process that you have now, unless there's a requirement.
All right.
Yeah.
No, there wasn't any reason for it. I just, after watching the select board a few times do it, it's efficient. But like I said, I don't know if we need that level of efficiency because we don't have as much to go through as they do. All right. The last item, I'll let Peter speak to this one on our procedural stuff. Posting FAC work product on the FAC webpage. Peter, you want to expound on that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. I think I think it'd be helpful to answer the question, what is it this committee does, so that the public doesn't at the last minute get outraged for misunderstanding our role in the process. I think it'd be helpful if we put some things on our webpage so that if they wanted to, they could click on them and see what we do. And I had a list of possible items that we might want to consider putting on the webpage. Right now we've got a couple of 3 studies. I think we have the structural analysis on the DPW garage, and we have our goals and objectives for 2020 and 2019, along with the budget stream dates. And there are a couple of others, I think. But for example, this would be where we would put our Parks and Recreation report from last year. This would be where we would put the FCA RFP. Now, none of this substitutes for where the stuff is supposed to be officially, but this is if people are interested and they get to our webpage, this is to educate them as to what we've done. So it would be the RFP for the FCA. It would be the letters to the planning board, to the budget committee, to the select board, along with outcomes from each of those places. It would be the Public Safety Center RFP outline. Even though it's in the 3 letters, I think that it represents a really solid body of work that should be called out separately so that people don't have to hunt for it. And then a list of accomplishments for 2020 and room for improvement. It's kind of administrative, but it's also building a body of evidence that shows the taxpayers what they're getting for their money out of us. So I just throw that out as a suggestion and open for discussion, obviously.
I'll just add, I think it's a good idea if it's not being redundant to another place on the website, which it probably isn't, but I think it's a good idea to show that the committee's working and an example of some of the deliverables and promotes what we're trying to do. So I agree with it, Peter.
Yeah, and it could even be a hyperlink that takes them to the other locations instead of reposting the same information in the same, in a different location.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I mean, that's just make it easier for somebody to try to find this stuff on the website. It's good.
I agree.
All right.
I know when I was thinking about joining the committee, I was surprised how I couldn't figure out exactly what it did. So I think it'd be helpful also for our search.
Sounds good. Should we vote then on this? Sure.
I move we do it if we need to vote.
Yes, okay. So we get a motion to make more work for Bob Glowacki and provide him with all the links to the various documents that we would like from the FAC webpage. So we have a motion for that.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay, so how do we vote? Rob, how do you vote to proceed with that?
Proceed,
Item.
please. Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Peter?
Yes.
Amanda?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes too. So we'll move to get that done. Who would somebody like to volunteer to track down those documents
I'll do it.
on the town? Okay, thanks, Peter, and get that to Bob.
Yeah, I'll call Bob and ask him how he wants me to do it, and
Yeah,
we'll get it done.
yeah. I think if we just find the web page that the document's on and send him a pointer to the document so he knows where to link to. Hopefully that's not too much work, but you can let us know.
I'll find a good way to make it look pretty too. So
Okay. And I'm assuming too, we do have a web page on the town site under the committees. We must have an FAC
Yeah.
page. Okay. So that already exists. All right. That sounds good. So that's the end of my procedural items. Next item up was deliberative session and town vote. So that occurred on Saturday, February 6th, just after our last meeting. I kind of know secondhand how it went. It sounds like there were very few people at the meeting, and all of the warrant article items passed and will be on the ballot. And those are all the ones that Peter and I sat in on the select board meeting at the budget hearing and saw them go through and approve or not approve. So it looks like all of those that did get approved are moving forward. Daryl, do you have any more comments on that?
I don't. Nothing changed from deliberative session, so yeah, it's and we haven't had discussions regarding anything to do with that part of DPW. We're focused on the drainage right now, so that that other project is not on focus, and yeah.
Okay, so it sounds like that's moving forward. All of those CIP items, and I believe the only two that we commented on are really the only ones I think we would provide input on. Everything else was, I guess, what I'd call horizontal work, but like street work or other items like that. So, did anybody have anything else they want to add relative to that? No? Okay. Maybe we'll get out of this meeting early today. Next item on the agenda. Oh, and I guess just to close that one out too. So the town vote, Daryl or Dave or Melissa, do you guys know when that is?
Tuesday, March 9th, is it?
Oh, okay. So March 9th, and I don't think we're on the hook to do anything before then. It's, the warrant articles are printed and ready to go, and we've given our 2 cents on it, and I think that's it for that. So we'll just wait to see the results of the vote. And depending on how that goes, like if that, well, that might be another agenda item. Yeah. So the next item on the agenda, let's move to that. It's the public safety complex. A couple of things on that. The first one, Peter would like to give us an update on the police department stakeholders committee. Peter?
Yeah, actually, I didn't realize I was going to give an update, but let me just tell you what I've done. Ann Sermon is the chair of the stakeholders committee. She's a former select board member. She's now on the zoning board. And she, and a long time ago, used to be part of the budget committee. She's a neighbor. And so in talking to her about another neighbor hood issue, we started talking about the warrant article for the public safety complex analysis of alternatives and feasibility study. So all I did was basically give her the rationale that led us to recommend what we recommended, and answer her questions about what kind of work was going to be done. And then I gave her an outline or a kind of, general picture on how we were going to be trying to, with our outline of the RFP, try to get the most important things done for it, for the $100,000 as opposed to the $150,000 or $200,000 that we recommended. And in our discussion, I made a point of, and by the way, all of this was neighbors, so I wasn't speaking on behalf of the committee or anything like that. So she knows that, and she wasn't speaking on behalf of the stakeholders committee either. And I made a point of saying that we really obviously thought it was really important in this process to have a robust public input, because A, the public was going to pay the bill, and B, because obviously we thought that was a way to build support for the project, and C, it was a way to avoid a repetition, with all due respect, Melissa, of the Parks and Recreation situation that we faced last year. So she took all that aboard, and at some point, I think, and I don't know whether she's going to be able to make it today. She might have Zoomed in as a member of the public for this meeting. I don't know if she did, but at some point she's going to go back to the her committee and probably talk about what arrangement or what have you we think we would like to have from them as part of the public input. So I think we probably just need to chat among ourselves as the committee as to what we think would be a good role for their committee, and probably through one of their members in being involved in our efforts for the public safety complex study. And that's kind of where we left it. I mean, I have my own personal predilection, but unless you want to talk about that now, we can talk about it at the next meeting, or we can talk about it. I'm sorry.
No, I was Peter. I was just looking for clarification on. It sounds like there's a couple different committees for the police at this point. This police committee is not necessarily the building committee. It's just a policing overall operations kind of thing. Is that correct?
Well, it's a kind of a policy-oriented, and Daryl, correct me. I thought it was a committee, and the way I read about it and heard about it, it's basically a way to get the public involved with the police department and its various initiatives, so that the police department has the benefit of public input before it does something, so that if it's about to do something that may or may not make the public happy, it A, knows that in advance, and B, perhaps can factor in public reaction into whatever its plans are. So it's kind of policy oriented, operations oriented. It's in no means is it dedicated toward the one particular topic of renovating, building, dealing with what we do with a public safety center. So you can see that coming underneath it in their purview, but it's not the kind of committee or group that I think we've talked about and Bob Kelly's talked about as a way to move along the project from a facilities point of view.
Yeah, I thought they were. Go ahead, Daryl.
It's very limited in scope, so it's for community police relations. Again, the sense was not that this would be an ongoing, forever committee. It has to stay very shy of commission type of duties. The committee is a subset of people in the community, and building is far out of the scope of this. It's advisory for the chief. So and again, to a limited scope, limited time. yeah, it is a great idea to reach out for sort of public relations, but yeah, I think the workflow or the org chart would sort of go this as a community advisory group for the chief, and then the chief interacting with the facilities advisory committee towards the budget process. But yeah, this is definitely would be out of the direct route of building.
Yeah, I thought there was going to be some sort of steering committee for that, for the facility. And then also, does the fire department have a similar representation, or how does that work?
I think that's to be determined though, Chris, right? I don't think that is, I mean, I think that's what maybe we need to recommend, or that there is a steering or building committee. I don't think that there's one that's been established yet, right? Dave, we talked about this, is that you were going to take the lead on the RFP to the consultant, and then we'll go from there. But that may be something that we wanted to make a strong recommendation about those steps. And I mean, I'm looking at the committee website right now, and it's pretty clear on what their charter is. And like Darryl said, it's pretty straightforward. It could be just a group that we bounce ideas off that for how to get community involvement in the process, and just ask them about how to do that. But because that's what it looks like. It just looks like it's a group that's supposed to help the police department with community building and things like that. So.
Okay. Yeah, and the other aspect of the public safety complex, then, so with the vote due March 9th, should we have an RFP, a revised RFP ready to go in the event that warrant article should pass? Which would mean maybe you could take a look and mark it up before our next meeting, and at our next meeting we could review and have something to hand to Dave, so that way if things pass on March 9th, if he felt like it, he could hit the ground running after that. Thoughts?
I thought, Dave, from our last meeting, I couldn't tell whether we were supposed to try to pare down the outline and then give it to Dave, or whether Dave was going to take a first stab at drafting an RFP. So, and I'm happy either way. If we want to pare down the outline first, and then Dave takes a stab at it. There was a sense I got from the last meeting that we didn't want to have a ton of work done until after it passed, in the anticipation that if it didn't pass, people wouldn't have spent an awful lot of time and effort on the RFP itself. But I would, I don't know where the happy medium is on that, but I agree that if it does pass, we should be ready really quickly. And that's when, I guess I would suggest, that's when by then we should have a recommendation as to what kind of group fits within the town structure, whether it's advisory or whatever you call it, whatever the authority of the group is. I'm not gonna venture, but the group that Mark was talking about, in terms of who should be on it, membership wise, and that sort of thing, I think we should have that ready so that if it does pass, there's no lag time as far as that part of it going on. And if that helps Dave write his RFP faster, so much the better.
I would disagree with that a little bit, Peter. I don't think the RFP, trimming that down, would require a large committee input or anything. I think that's something we could do rather quickly, and I'm sure Dave himself could do it rather quickly.
No, I wasn't arguing this committee would do that. Oh, no, I agree with you. I think that our committee ought to be the ones to do it. It was our committee's outline, and our committee is the subject matter experts on this. No, I don't by any means mean that we should open that up. to other people first. We should have ready what we want to have ready. And,
I think just to go back to this, I think the last time we talked, Dave was going to take a look at the draft. He was going to draft it up. He was going to bring it back to us. We were going to review it, and he was going to take a look at revising the scope based upon what his information was on what he believes he can take care of versus what was something that a consultant would take care of. And that way, we don't need it. And we discussed that we wouldn't need a full committee. We just need to get us to kind of go through that revised list.
And yes, that's correct. And I also suggested we do it the meeting after the vote, because I think if you put that on the agenda in one meeting with us and all the knowledge on this, that wouldn't be an issue finalizing, the scope of that. And then I could issue the RFP. And I mean, it's, whether, I don't know where the third Thursday of the month falls right after the vote. So, and then we usually give, 30 days, put it in the paper, 30 days to respond. So it's only going to be, maybe a week and a half after the vote. So it's not going to, we'll be out to RFP pretty quickly after the vote, assuming it passes.
Okay. Well, that sounds good.
I'd suggest it.
Do that then. I had forgotten how we determined that, and I just wanted to make sure in case we did want to have something ready in the event that it passed.
The framework of an RFP, I have them, RFPs, RFQs, I have them. All I basically do is, do a little intro on the project and a little background, which, I could do that in, half an hour, and then take that scope and implement it and, just cut and paste it into the scope of work. So it's very simple once we get that scope of work, it's just cutting and pasting and writing a little intro. So it's not laborious at all.
Okay. Sounds good.
I do think, Chris, that the group that Mark was talking about, that we've talked about before, we ought to have, maybe at the next meeting, we should have some idea of what we see as whatever this entity is called going, not this entity, but that entity that going forward. That presumably will include, the police and fire departments and the budget recommendations committee and our committee. I mean, representatives.
Energy committee and yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we need to discuss about how many strap hangers we want on the. No, seriously, how many of those people, should be on it, or do they need to be on it, or should they be consulted by it? I don't know. I'll defer to you guys as far as building oversight committees for a specific project.
Yeah, I was just going to ask. I mean, Dave, does the town have a process for that? I mean, the Parks and Rec was probably the last one that just had. There was a Parks and Rec committee, I guess, right? That was really that process. But the library had their committee. I mean, I don't know. I mean, how does the town do this?
Well, I think it's a case-by-case basis. I mean, on this public safety complex, is that what you're
Yeah, that's right. I'm sorry. Yeah, the public safety.
I envisioned, as I described before, I envisioned this committee. We don't need to create too many committees. So, right. In my opinion, and we have. And this is a public safety complex, and the fire chief, and the police chief, their focus is public safety. They're policemen, they're firemen. Like I said last time, a lot of police chiefs, fire chiefs, work for community for 40 years and they never build a new building. So I thought I talked to them. They're okay with that. It's going to be kind of a collective, I think, between the two chiefs and myself and this facilities committee. That's how I envisioned it, unless the select board feels otherwise and creates a separate committee for this. But the library was a different animal. That was, that's a trustee situation. And there was a rec advisory committee. There always is, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was like a standing committee that was, set up to move in. So that's my thinking on it. And I, as long as you folks are willing to do that, I think that would be the best path forward.
I think it should be streamlined, so whatever you feel like is, that makes sense to me. And then we pull in, once the study is completed, pull in the energy committee, pull in the sustainability committee, pull in other committees to give them opportunities to review and comment, right? Okay, all right.
To the extent you see fit that you need these other communities' input, and the ones you listed, I'm on all of them anyway. So, but I think we should keep it with us and the fire chief. We've gone this far. We created the scope of work, and so let's keep rolling.
Yeah, I would agree with, I guess, about 95% of what you guys have said. However, I do believe that Bob Kelly and I don't know about Judy, but certainly Bob expects to be pretty heavily involved in this entire process as far as how the $100,000 is going to get spent. Because his committee was the committee that made the initiative to take it down to 100,000. And he did that in part based on, his understanding of what he thought the police and fire department were wanting or leaning toward. So Bob, I think, or the Budget Recommendations Committee, I think we need to consider whether or not their position in the process, not only obviously what they did before, but also what they're going to do in the future, makes them a different sort of animal than the Energy Committee or the Sustainability Committee. And I have my own personal ideas on that, but unless we're going to talk about it now and come to some conclusion, I think we need to think about that and consider their involvement earlier in the process than you might have the Energy Committee or the Sustainability Committee involved.
Just for clarification, are you talking about involving the Budget Committee in the RFP process?
No. What I'm talking about, and again, I'm only going on what Bob said and my knowledge of Bob, and I'm happy to be completely wrong on this, but part of the reason Bob wanted this thing done at $100,000 was because he had this idea that somehow or another buried in this town staff was all this analytical talent that was going to do the job that he didn't want to pay consultants to do. And that colors his view of the $100,000, but it also the fact that he and Judy came away from talking with the fire and police departments that they thought they had a preferred option already, made Bob resistant to our argument that there needs to be a full vetting of more than one option. So I guess what I'm saying is I don't think Bob's going to go away or the Budget Recommendations Committee is going to go away. I don't think they need to be involved in the outline of the RFP and in the drafting of the RFP. I'm talking about this whatever this group is called, this smaller, let's call it Building Oversight Committee. I don't know what you call it, but the other group that's going to either, I think that's going to shape the execution of the RFP. If that's what this group's first task is, I think you need to consider whether there should be a representative of the Budget Committee on it.
So
that's all.
I'll take in, and I guess one quick question, because, well, first a statement. I have to talk to Bob Kelly about an unrelated matter tomorrow. So I'll run with it. I'll talk to him. I'll figure out what his thinking is and take care of that aspect. But also, am I hearing that you're going to make some sort of different? I thought it was the Facilities Committee. Now you're saying like as a whole, you'd revise the RFP and so forth. Not are you this building's oversight committee? What can you?
No. Whatever Mark was talking about, it seemed to me, and Mark, correct me, I got the impression that at some point after the RFP went out, there would be some kind of building oversight committee that would be established that would do whatever needed to be done from a town point of view to guide the study process along. And then further on, obviously, if at the end of the study process, the town's willing to buy the preferred alternative, would be involved in the actual oversight of that construction project. I don't know if that's going too far or not.
Peter, do you want me to read back what the conversation was for clarity?
Yeah,
essentially, because I have notes. So essentially, yes, Mark brought that up. I mean, I'm not going to read literally the notes, but I have it here and I can send it to you because I was typing as people talked. Mark did bring that up, but then we all talked about that not being really necessary, that this committee should be the one to do that, and chopped the idea of forming new committees unless Dave said the select board thought we needed it, but otherwise, no.
Okay, that's fine. I misunderstood. Yeah, I'd be amazed if we're going to get away with that, but that's fine. No, seriously, I'm happy with that.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty common once that gets approved and the RFP gets issued. I mean, a lot of it is staff internal project management of the consultants. I mean, I do that all the time without a committee, manage, hundreds of thousands of dollars of projects. So I think I was going to, what I envisioned was, staff was going to do the main parts, but you were going to always be kept informed and kind of work together and any drafts, any milestones that are reached or any, that by the consultants are provided to this committee. Not a separate one. So, but the point well taken about Bob Kelly, I will talk to him tomorrow and
my only suggestion with that, with Bob and the budget recommendations committee, where they are, is, they obviously have to stay within their charter or whatever they're supposed to be doing. And it's just, I just want us to go down to, down a process that then there's expectations that for every project that there's this involvement that it's outside of their charter or their tasks. Right. So I think it's, there's all public documents. They'll have a chance to comment. And I just bring that up as a concern about, adding more red tape to the process. But that's where, if our committee is going to be the one that's going to take, I guess, to kind of lead and work with Dave, and then, Bob can come to our meetings, right. And work with us on, if there's a draft, comment on it, that sort of thing. I'm just bringing it up as a point. That's all.
No, it's a great point. And I'll make sure I'll kind of define the process. So I don't like, you can't have it too many cooks in the kitchen, if you will. So we'll get that down. We'll get the process down.
Sounds good. And then I'll go a little rogue. In addition to the public safety complex, I just want to bring up one thing on the DPW. Mark had made the suggestion last meeting that maybe we could mark up and provide comments to the DPW on their study. I think that's a good idea. Let me first call Jen and see how they're proceeding on that. I guess I'd just like to find out what they're thinking their next step would be and what comments would be helpful for that.
I also think we're still missing the digital images, the real plans and stuff like that, versus the ones that we couldn't read. So I think there's a bit of missing information before we start marking stuff up.
Yeah, let me call her too and just try. I'll ask for that information, and I'll also ask: is it helpful for us to mark that up, or is this something you're even going to pursue or not? So I just want to make sure if we do comment that it's commenting on a direction that they're planning to head in. I don't want to waste our time or her time. So I guess we'll do nothing with that. I'll call her and then I'll let you guys know what the deal is. And if she would welcome feedback on that, I'll try to get the updated drawings, and we could do that possibly prior to the next meeting or the meeting after that. Next agenda item, I guess one thing I wanted to bring up, facilities plan. Last meeting, we talked a little bit about how we could proceed to create priorities in the absence of a facility condition assessment. We bounced around some ideas on evaluating the current buildings, talking to DPW, Jeff Beck in particular, try to develop that list. And I just want to throw out there too that as we look to, we're starting to tee up these pretty large building projects for what I would realistically see as like at least the next 10 years. When you talk about DPW, you talk about the public safety complex, the rec center obviously still has needs that they want to address with a new building. So to me, that feels like 10 to 15 years of big public projects. I am interested in this summer, maybe we could develop a plan for how we feel that should be rolled out. And that could be informed by some of the data that we acquire and analyze based on some of our information and experience. So that's just something I want to throw out there as a high level plan. Maybe a deliverable for this year could be not just a recommendation on a particular project, but maybe a high level overview kind of master plan that Mark had talked about at some points last year as well. Just for those particular projects that we know are coming up. Any thoughts on that?
What size, Chris, are you thinking the big building projects that we've been talking about or
Yeah.
the smaller ones that Jeff Beck may have in mind? That may not be, like maybe $100,000 project or something like that. So you're thinking all of the CIP, basically the CIP projects, right?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's something we'd have to talk about and decide how granular we should get. What reasonably we have time to develop and what would be the most helpful for the town. To me, it just looks like there's a lot of big projects, and if we could come up with a long range plan to help. The town wouldn't necessarily have to follow it, but they could have something and the public could provide input on it as well. And it can be flexible enough to change from year to year as needed. But it's just, we have a lot of facility needs, it looks like now, for big new capital projects, not just small upkeep ones. So, I wouldn't mind putting some framework to that at a high level.
I like the idea. I was just trying to understand. Because I think the town's already identified kind of the big stuff, right? They want to replace the DPW complex, public safety. We have Parks and Rec. I think it also ties into almost each building they should look at and say what is the future? What are the needs for this building? And it's what we've been talking about, right, with the facility conditions. Yeah,
and this goes back to our original discussion, which basically I think it's a good way of codifying what we talked about earlier, which is listing all those projects, because it's the town hall, it's offices, it's all these things, and it would be good just to have a list of them so they're in front of us. The other thing we did discuss, which is coming up with a rating system for us as we begin to try to build, when we start really doing the facilities assessment, what is our rating system and what value do we give to each one of those? Is it safety? Is it, what are those items that set the criteria for evaluation?
Yeah, I agree. And I'm talking in broad terms. So Mark, I don't have specifics. We could break it down as a list of all projects, and maybe on a year-to-year basis, we can adjust the stack ranking to kind of put forth what we think are the most important ones. And this is an open discussion for our team to kind of, what kind of steering do we want to do on all of this?
Yeah, I mean, to me, just how we do it here is that we have a 10-year plan, and every year, I mean, every project that we're trying to accomplish over the next 10 years, we put a date against it, right? So we want to do this project on a certain date, and then but those dates are assigned based on when we can afford it, but also the need. I mean, we don't want to be spending money on buildings that we're going to be replacing in 5 years, right? So it's this balancing act of trying to not waste money. I mean, I'm all for it, Chris. I think maybe we just look at what the town wants to do for major projects, and then it has to tie into what needs to happen, like the Parks and Rec building. Looking at if that's going to stay around for 10 years, then what needs to happen to that building to make it efficient and effective, and maybe that drives into bringing the project back to get them a different building or something else that happens. I'm all for it. I think it's just figuring out the logistics but
is it too redundant to the CIP? Like the CIP is basically a 5-year plan, I would say, although it's not necessarily ranked either. It's just, here's a collection of items that we're putting forth.
There was a list somewhere of all the town buildings, and we were going to get a list of the town buildings from someone at some point.
We got that. I don't know where it is.
Drive.
But we got that, and so we can probably get an updated list. But I think it's a really good idea. Wait a minute. I'm sorry, Amanda. Did I cut you off? I apologize.
No.
Were you done?
Yep.
Oh, okay. I think it's a really good idea to have this. I would say the difference with the CIP is not only in terms of number of years, but, and Dave, with all due respect, and Melissa, the CIP is kind of a wish list. And so what I envision, what Chris is talking about, is our assessment of the wish list and then going beyond just the years of the CIP to whether 10 years is the right number or 15, I don't know. And dealing with that and then putting on the facilities committee's judgment against those projects as well as those projects phasing. And I think, it'll be fairly clear what are the big projects, and it'll be a combination of what's in the CIP already and what Dave and Melissa or Russ know is coming down the pipe. But it'll also have to include, especially for buildings like the town hall and the town offices, a list of major renovations if the decision is going to be made that they're not going to be replaced. And with the town hall, I'm quite confident that's going to be the situation. But we need to have a multi-year look at how much a year the town wants to spend on the town hall, for example, and see how that relates to the spending requirements for other less than major buildings, but are still not insignificant projects in the maintenance category. So I think it's going to have to include the big ticket items, but also these smaller ticket items that still address major town facilities.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. And that goes to Mark's point, like a small CIP maintenance item should be viewed against whether it's going to be done on a facility that's still going to exist in a few years or something like that. I guess my thought would be that we could come up with our list. It would kind of stack rank the projects by what we thought were the highest needs. And also we could work with Russ and Melissa and Dave to kind of get a better idea of the finances, throw some potential budgets at these and try to figure out where they should fall in terms of like a 10-year plan. Just to give a kind of a window, like, okay, so in year 3, we're going to drop these 2 bond items, and then in year 6, there'll be something else. So I guess as opposed to the CIP too, it would be more of a chronological look and a forecast as to what could be spent. And then and it wouldn't be fixed in stone either. It could be something that could be updated from year to year as things change. So,
Well, it'd be interesting though too if you look at like if the public safety complex, right? And so right now we're asking for the town, say they approve the feasibility study, and then looking at the design and then the construction. Just putting together, if everything was approved, how long it would take to replace that building, right? Or whatever is going to happen with that. So, once you factor in and how long it takes to do design construction on these projects, and then you still may have to do something to that building just to maintain it for the next 3 to 4 years until. So to me, it's if you start putting dates against some of these big things, and then you can start to figure out, how this will look financially. And I know that Russ had mentioned this before, that he's done that, right, as far as all the different bond payments and stuff, and when something gets off the books. But I think once you start putting dates and figuring out when, in reality, when things can actually be done, and it helps plan a lot as far as what you should be doing to these buildings. The water treatment facility is the other one, right? That's that old building that needs a lot of work. And so, but where is that? And I think there may be something on the CIP articles or CIP process, but I think it's a good idea. So maybe it's just taking the CIP and for us to start putting in some dates. If it was done on this date, what does that mean? It's usually a range that they put together in the CIP, I think.
sorry, Melissa, go ahead. Melissa had her hand up. She's going to go.
Thank
Oh, sorry.
you. That's okay, no worries. So am I to understand, I just want to understand the process you're proposing. Is it to take what is submitted for CIP from Russ, Dave, whoever's in that role in the department heads, and then rank them and put them in a chronological order? Or are you wanting to create your own list that you feel should be the town priorities in the next 5-10 years? Are you going to be taking feedback from planning, the department heads, Russ? Do you see what I'm saying? That I'm just trying to understand where that list is coming from. Is the list coming from what's submitted as part of CIP, or is that a list that you are suggesting you're putting together?
It's an excellent question, and I think that's what we're trying to figure out. A little from column A, a little from column B, I think, and it's just something we're floating now and trying to figure out. Oh, go ahead, Rob, too. But
Yeah, I was just going to say, it historically, we can, part of this is that the list, per what Chris just said, is that it would be a combination of projects we already know that have been on the queue, have been there for years. And part of our overall goal is to try to keep these from being on the list year after year after year after year. So the more that we can make these things successful and get through the warrant process, they don't sit there, and then projects don't, facilities don't degrade. They actually meet current needs, and they do it in a way that meets our budgetary constraints from the town. So, I think we're just trying to put something in a format that we can begin to sort it by what our priorities as we go through the process.
Okay.
And it would be a public facing list, and so the public could get used to what might be coming down the road too. And I think part of our goal would be to set it up so that the timing would happen in a way where it could be pretty revenue neutral in terms of a bond item coming off the debt list and then maybe adding something on. So it's not a hit on the taxes at all. Maybe it's, something like that. So just maybe a long-term plan that the town would be free to use, and the people, the voters could get used to what's coming or see what's coming, and hopefully have faith in the planning process, which I'm sure they do now. But this would help augment that.
But it would be but correct me if I'm wrong, it would use the CIP and any other town information as inputs, but it would be an independent racking and stacking, if you will, by the facilities committee of the projects.
Yeah, I agree. It would be independent. It would be our ideas. But it'd be informed by all the town departments.
It has to be.
Yeah.
It has to be.
Any other thoughts or comments on that?
We want to set a next step so that we know what our next concrete step on that is.
Yes. I would say, I guess the first thought off my head is we could start compiling a list. Well, actually, I guess the first thing would be where are we going to collect the information for the list? And then in the meetings, we start to develop it. You know, some of our meetings, especially through the summer, could be more working sessions where we identify and debate and document all these things, try to put together a list, and then, maybe come up with a draft of something by the end of the summer or early fall.
Just as we talked about last time, is that the town can export their current town-owned properties into an Excel spreadsheet, which would give us a starting point just from the list. I think, Dave, we had talked about that earlier, of just trying to get that, or whether we get that from the assessor's office, basically just an export of the town-owned properties.
We had something like
Just
that
a
a year
list?
ago.
Yeah, that's all it is. It's a list. It tells you kind of, it actually, if you look at the spreadsheet that's on the assessor's site, it gives you kind of generally the building description, gives you the square footage, it gives you the kind of what it is, where it is. To me, that's a good database starting point for just literally starting to record it. I clipped it out of the thing from the last time. I basically just took a copy clip out of the town's PDF, but if we had it as text, it would be great.
So, Amanda, I didn't really answer your question very well as far as next step.
Well, it sounds like maybe get this Excel document, and then what other documents are we going to use as our starting documents? Probably the CIP, probably the ADA study. So we just need to kind of collect them together and then figure out how we want to get the department head input. We had at one point talked about talking to them, and then another point we said that there was another place we could pull it from, and I lost track of that.
Yeah, like Dave says, they talk with all the departments in the spring and early summer, and then it sounds like in the middle of the summer is when they bring forth their recommendations. Is that right, Dave?
Yeah, for the CIP?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
okay, so that's just for the CIP.
But yeah, and it's always rolling too. It's just ideally the CIP is like all you're adding is the 6th year, and sometimes reprioritizing. It sounds like what you want to do is basically do a 15-year CIP or 20-year CIP.
How about 10 to 15? Okay. Well, I was just thinking based on the amount of projects we have teed up now, that's 15 years worth of work, I would say. Like to get a new DPW building, a new public safety complex, a new rec center, water treatment plant, that's easy 15 years before that stuff is all done. So, a time frame we can debate. 10 years is usually pushing it because a lot changes over the course of 10 years, but that might be a thing to shoot for.
Yeah, and then the CIP is really, it's a document that, this are the needs, but then the planning board doesn't get involved in determining, okay, how do we pay for it, the budgeting, and how does it get on the warrant, and when does it go? I mean, that's for the budget committee, select board. I mean, that's who the select board's in charge of the town, and the budget committee advisory on the funds. So the planning board is not going to get involved in that. They're just going to say, okay, these are the identified needs, and then it goes up the chain to get funded or not.
So Dave, can I ask Dave just a procedural question? So Dave, the CIP document, I'm looking at it now. It's a 5-year document. This is supposed to cover anything that is, says projects, vehicles, and equipment needs that are over 25,000, right?
And it has to have a expected life of 5 years.
Okay.
We don't.
So if the roof needed to be replaced on the water treatment facility and it's $50,000, would it go through this process?
Well, then we apply common sense. If it's like a routine repair situation of an existing like that, like a roof repair, no, it wouldn't.
Even it's a full replacement. I mean, it's over 25,000. It would not go through this, and
it's not automatic that if it's 25,000, if it's routine maintenance and repair and you're fixing an existing roof and it costs $30,000, no, we're not going to put it in the CIP.
So would it still be a warrant article?
That depends. That's up to the select board, budget committee, because, it can be a standalone warrant or it can be put into the operating budget. So that's not a decision, I make or we make.
Okay. So, I mean, to me, the CIP is a starting point, but then it's these other things like that you just described that might not be in this, but still need to be done, right? So it could be out of the $100,000 maintenance fund, or it could be a warrant article because it's $100,000 that needs to happen. So
yep.
I guess that's, yeah. So to me, to answer Amanda's, my opinion is this: you start with the CIP, then it's the building list and informational knowledge from maybe Jeff saying, well, this needs to happen. This is going to have to happen. The boiler's going to have to be replaced here, windows here, all that. The cupola, the cupola project's the perfect one, right? That wasn't a CIP. That was just done because it had to be done. But that's not all of it, right? There's a lot more that has to happen up there. So at least I think, but okay, thanks. Just wanted to make sure I understood the process.
And for Dave and Daryl and Melissa's benefit, the reason I throw this out there is not to come up with some overarching evil plan that we must follow. It's just, in our role to advise the select board on facilities, our initial step and part of our charter was to develop a process whereby we could identify priorities and advise them on them accordingly. And I think this is just the way for us to do this. Originally, we were going to have an outside firm do a facilities condition assessment. I think that's still our hope and plan for someday to have that done, but I don't think it's not happening this year. Possibly it'll happen next year, but in the absence of having an outside firm do an FCA, we're trying to figure out the best way that we can put forward the same type of quality information to help the select board make the decisions that they want to make. So that's where we're coming from on that.
Maybe an outline, like a next step would be I'm trying to have, what is this final product, and maybe just an outline of it.
Yeah. All right.
Because my question would be okay, you're not going to prioritize them by finances. You're not going to get into how much they cost and do that. You're just going to say, these are the facility needs, these are needs, and these are the priority needs, and then let someone else figure out the finances and how to pay for it.
And
I would disagree with you.
Well, yeah.
I would disagree with you, Dave.
No, I'm not. You can't disagree with me, Peter, because I'm asking a question.
Okay, let me answer it then. Let me answer it then.
Peter, have you?
Let me try to answer it again. One of the things that we've always been concerned about are relatively speaking, the facilities desires of the town affordable? And also, when are these projects going to come about, and how does that relate to financing them as well as other projects? So cost really does become a pretty important component of it in the way that we argue or the way we assess facilities. I mean, the Parks and Recreation building was a perfect example where this committee decided that it was a lower priority for a variety of reasons, but one of the reasons was it was concerned that funding the Parks and Recreation building was going to prejudice the voters from supporting more important projects such as the Public Safety Center and the DPW. So the idea of laying in the funding lines or the financing lines is pretty important to making recommendations about when you address the needs of the town. So costs and budgets and funding streams are all part of at least how in the past the Facilities Committee has thought about various and sundry projects. And I'd be amazed if we're going to change that because it's such an important consideration. And on our plan, whatever we come up with is not going to be viable or realistic, and therefore convincing anybody if we don't address affordability. Because if it's only dealing with addressing needs, there's not enough money to address needs, all needs.
Yeah, I have to disagree with that, because you're opening up you're going to get into debt service, what our debt service, what other, when's this bond going to retire, when's that bond going to retire, to determine, to fit it into a timeline. I mean, that's
yes.
And then you're writing a 10-year plan. I mean, you're going to start estimating what things cost 8 years from now. That's going to be, I'm just saying, that's pretty monumental, but I don't know. I'd like to see an outline of it, and then I might comment further. But it seems like this might be, I don't know. I don't know what's wrong with just identifying the needs. The building needs to be insulated or not. The roof needs to be replaced or not, and then prioritizing them, and figuring out how to pay for them.
Oh, let's go back to the next steps. I think the next steps is to get the list of the items buildings that we have, the information that's associated with each of the buildings, any historical knowledge that we have to put together so we can begin to start the work. Because I think if we're trying to figure out what the end product is at this point, I don't think we're going to get there. I think what we decided in the first case was that we need to do the FCA so that we could determine the conditions of the buildings, so that when we did some planning and we wanted to do a master plan, we wanted to do a facilities master plan, which would have allowed us to be able to cross-reference the use of the buildings with their conditions, to be able to advise the town on whether they should reinvest in a property or they should dissolve a property, or what they want to do with that property. So that's our goal.
Yeah, no, I think
we'll go from there.
Yeah, I think developing an outline is good. We'll start. This is very fluid. We don't have a set outcome yet, and I think that'll be a result of a lot of discussions. Dave, I agree that it's hard to get into too many details, but I think ultimately we might touch on those things, but it wouldn't be something we develop. We'd be relying on people like you to say, hey, where does this fit in over a 10-year timeline and something like that. So yeah, we're not going to become economics majors and try to forecast everything over the next 10 years. It's just to come up with a list, and try to adjust the list based on many of those factors, on needs. Budget does come into play, unfortunately. I think it'll be a list based on a lot of factors, but it'll be informed by people like you and Melissa and Russ and Daryl and everybody else. So, all right, next. So we'll pull together the documents. I think we had a list of all the town properties at one point. I remember seeing a spreadsheet for that. Does anybody still have that?
Is that the H.L. Turner, Dave?
That study has it, but I thought I sent out the Primex building list to everyone.
I don't think I saw that, Dave. I actually took that building list from the town report, so all I did was basically in the assessor's office. If you just basically type in all of the town-owned properties, it gives you a list of the properties. So all I did was take a PDF snippet of that. So we actually had the actual downloaded document, then we could actually use that information.
Because I have Primex insures all our buildings.
Right.
So they have it's every one of them. I mean, there's a little doghouse on Court Street, of 50 square feet. So I have that list, and it's every structure we own.
Yeah, I guess if you could resend that.
Not in a nice.
Perfect.
Yeah, it's probably not in a nice usable format. I mean, I'll send it to you. I thought I did. Sorry about that.
You probably did. I've seen something like that, but I don't. I can't find it in my files. So
I will resend it out. I mean, you're gonna, you might have to cull through it and put it onto your own spreadsheet, but it has every building, every structure we own. So
sounds good. All right, so maybe at the next meeting we'll reserve like a half hour, start reviewing, put together an outline, and start discussing what that might look like. All right, we're coming up towards the end of our time together. I had an item for old business updates. I don't know if we have anything on that. We did get the ADA study, Dave, thank you. I haven't had a chance to look through it yet. I don't know if anybody else has.
Skimmed.
there's a lot in there.
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to look at it yet.
And it's just, like I said, it's in draft. I mean, so we still have the public input part. I'm going to launch that. I've already kind of started. I got to get the survey out and so forth. So, and then once the survey and their responses and so forth go directly back to DA's disability access consultants. And then once they get all that, then they'll compile it, finalize the report and send it out.
Dave, what's going to come out of that? Is there going to be recommendations for projects in terms of upgrading any facilities to ADA?
Well, yeah. I mean, there's this program called DAC Track that they put all the things in it, and they gave a tutorial for Jeff Beck, myself, and Doug Eastman, who is actually the ADA coordinator in town, about kind of keeping track of them, being able to prioritize them. The initial goal when this first came out was a warrant article to create a capital reserve fund, and it was $50,000, and it was going to be $35,000 for the study and $15,000 to do some improvements. But then it could carry on. But the select board at that time didn't want the capital reserve, so they just did $35,000 for the study. So we had funding for the study. So we have no funding associated with any of these recommendations. So either got to figure out a way to implement them into the operating maintenance budget, or try again with the capital reserve fund. But we're waiting to have that discussion again till once we get the final ADA report.
So Dave, just on the scope of that, I noticed there were some facilities like the Parks and Rec that were not included in that in the study. So I think there's some areas that I found there were some gaps. Just want to know about what that scope and why there were some gaps.
Well, there were some gaps because we had to identify buildings that needed to be done and reviewed. And at that time, there was a proposal that was going to the voters, and we had spent over, a couple $100,000 on a design for a recreational complex. So we didn't want to hear we didn't want to hear we spent $5,000 on an ADA study, and then the vote, we're building a new building. So we decided to hold off on that until the vote. Sure. And then, we can determine it at a later date. We did get a quote on the side to do that building, but it was an extra like $5,000. So.
Right. So it's the building, but it's also the Parks and Rec, the pool and the playground, the pool, and all that area. And I think that's if we've got a second phase of that, some of those areas really should be covered, because that one of my comments about the Parks and Rec plan was that we did not address the changing room or the pool house or anything in that project, which is woefully inadequate in its facility. So I think that would be a good way.
Well, yeah, we didn't. I agree, and we will. We can. We decided not to do that because it was being changed. An architect was going to look at it. They were going to review it for ADA. So and it was going to possibly be changing. So we just didn't want to, spend money and then it's useless, depending on how the outcome. In hindsight, probably should have done it. We'd have that information, but we decided not to at that time. But certainly we can, put it on the schedule to do it.
Okay, we're just about at the end of our time. I guess that anybody have any final comments on anything before we close the meeting?
Great job, Chris.
With what?
The whole thing of putting it, organizing it and getting it put together. Good job.
Okay, I feel like we're still swimming in muddy water, but we'll figure it out. We'll get it squared away here. All right, so if no other comments, thank you, everybody. We'll get together again the first week of March. And I think that's it. Does anybody want to make a motion to adjourn? Can I do that? Motion to adjourn. Do I have a second? Dave, you can't second it.
I didn't.
Second. All right. Rob, we all set? Do we have to make a vote?
Please adjourn.
All right. Mark?
Yes.
Amanda?